welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of That Dynasty Podcast. I am your host, Matthew, and alongside my co-host, Joe, we are excited to be back with you all this week. As always, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, on X, and make sure to stay in touch with us throughout the week. We do respond, and this podcast will be available anywhere you listen to podcasts as well. If you feel free to listen along. We do appreciate any reviews that you feel like leaving us and any interactions that you feel like shooting our way throughout the week. This last week was surprisingly the least shocking, and I feel like almost do I dare to say, the most normal week that we've had in this NFL season so far. Wouldn't you say so, Joe?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had some injuries, but that's kind of become a normality in the NFL, and not a lot of crazy things happened. No 70-point games this week. So
No, we definitely didn't have any 70-point games this week, but we did have I'll be honest, I thought that the Dolphins and Bills game was headed that direction from a total points scored perspective, because when that game started out, oh my goodness, like the Bills couldn't stop the Dolphins couldn't stop the Bills. It was like, I don't know, was it 4 scoring drives in a row where it was just back to back to back to back? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is first off going to break fantasy. But second off, is going to be possibly the highest scoring game of all time. But then the Bills cranked up the defense and shut him down, and then kept scoring. But I think there probably was 70 total. No, I'm going crazy.
What was it, 48-20, I think.
It was almost 70 total points, I think, in that game.
Yeah.
But that was a fun game, man. I liked watching that game a lot. I wish that the Dolphins had scored a little bit more, but I had one DFS lineup where I had Josh Allen and Diggs, and they were stacked up there. I had Christian McCaffrey in that lineup. I had Braxton Berrios. I had a decent week. I had the Texans defense in that lineup. So as I'm saying this, you're probably like, oh my word, did you win every single tournament? I also started Raheem Mostert. I also started Robert Woods. And I also started somebody else that I can't remember, who put up just an absolute stinker. And it was a decent lineup, but was not a tournament breaker. Let's just say that. But it was a fun week, man. So excited to talk about this next week, and also look to see how we did in our predictions from last week. I think I might be catching up. I think I might be making up some ground.
I don't know. I think you might be getting a better percentage, but that's about it.
That could very well be. You want to take us through? Actually, let's take a look here. So this episode, we're going to go over very minimal. We're going to go over some league updates, and we're going to hit the trades that went down in the last 2 weeks. This time, in the last week, we actually did scrub the chat this time, and we made sure that we did get all of the trades. There was some controversy. We had people emailing us, hate emails, angry letters. They were actually throwing rocks at our windows because we missed a couple of trades last week. And we will never do that again. This is the worst week of my life. Never faced this type of criticism. And we made sure to double check this time. So we're going to go over some trades. We're going to hit our bops and flops. We're going to talk about our MVPs from this week. We're going to go over matchup predictions, and then finish it up with some power rankings. So, Joe, why don't you take us through the league updates and kind of talk through some of these trades?
Yeah, so the biggest league update is a name change, which is always nice to see. Shut Up and Take My Money ended up changing their name to Puka Pow, and it's kind of a cool name. We'll see if they change it back to something else if Puka ends up sucking with Cup back. But if Cup ever comes back, who knows?
Who?
Yeah. If Cooper Kupp comes back, it could be different, but I don't even know who that guy is right now. Stafford's going to get hurt, and the whole team will suck. So
you're very high on the Rams, I see.
Yes, not very high at all. But yeah, we got some trades that went down too. One of them involved me, as always. Games. Yeah, 2 of them actually. Well, I don't know if that second one involving me is really Yeah, we'll get to that one. But yeah, the first one that involves me is Javonte Williams and Palmer for Rashad White and a 26 first. And Matt, you were telling me before we started this, you weren't really a fan of that trade. You want to explain to everyone why you think I suck so bad in trading?
Listen, I don't think you suck so bad, man. I think that you're just addicted to trading, and I think
Yes,
that you
yes.
needed to get your fix,
Mhm.
possibly. Um, no, I think that moving Javonte Williams, he seemed to be at the time like I thought maybe one of your better assets to have, and so obviously I wouldn't be moving him for nothing. Seton Power is a team that's been traditionally very stacked, and so it makes sense that they would want to be a contender and can stay competitive. And they made a competitive move. Trading for Javonte Williams. I do think that picking up Williams and Palmer is a solid move. I like Williams more than I like Rashad White this season. Um, but the reason why I guess I didn't really love it is because I feel like Williams is worth more. And so it's not that I didn't like what you got. I just feel like you could have gotten a little bit more from Seed and Power, especially as he is going into this year of a championship. He's trying to repeat that. He's got um, Bajan Robinson. He's got Jonathan Taylor. He's got just these like really, really strong core, and now he's got Javonte Williams. And so, in theory, he's going to be trying to contend as long as possible, which means that each year that he continues to contend, that 2026 first round pick is going to go further and further down. And we can't predict that far out. Maybe the team is not as good in 2026. But it's also like you're not seeing a return on that for years, whereas Javonte could still be a good young running back on his rookie contract for maybe another 2, 3 seasons. Um, by the time his contract is up, you're just getting to pick at that point, and you don't even know what that's going to look like. So, um, it could always work out in your favor. Who knows? But I think that I just feel like could have held up for a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that. I made the trade, so I don't necessarily agree with you. But I'm not a huge Javante fan. And Seton Power was actually trying to get McLaughlin in that trade, and I held out, and I said I'm not really looking to move rookies. I'm not really looking to move real young guys. I think Javante's a good player. I think he could potentially, have a few good seasons ahead of him. But I've really yet to see any huge upside out of him. Obviously, he suffered a major injury that is hard to come back from your first year back. But I'd really like to see good upside out of him before I put my eggs into his basket. So I'm not a Javante bandwagoner by any means.
That's fair enough. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose they say.
Yes. But yeah, so we got another trade here. It looks like Andy and Isaiah made a trade, and that is Tank Dell and Dak Prescott. So, what are your reactions on that? What do you think about that one?
I think I texted you when it first went down, and I said I actually kind of like this trade. I like it. It's gutsy, gutsy on Isaiah's part. He drafted this year his first round pick. He took Anthony Richardson, and I think that he's kind of riding on the high of that and wanting to get out from behind Dak Prescott. Now we're in a single quarterback league, so you don't necessarily have the need to start multiple quarterbacks on a week in and week out basis. You can kind of afford to say, "Hey, I'll take a shot on this." And he traded away Dak Prescott for up and coming rookie Tank Dell, and Dell's had a couple of really good weeks so far. He's been seeing a lot of targets. He's building chemistry with rookie quarterback CJ Stroud, who also is throwing a lot. Um, and so I guess from a team need perspective, Isaiah didn't really need Prescott. And, I like the shot on Tank Dell. I think it's really risky. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not a Dak lover either. So, if I'm honest, and a lot of people are probably going to think I'm crazy, you might too, but I think Dak could lose his job in 2 years. So I'm not really a Dak fan. Yeah, so I don't mind the trade at all. Especially like you said, a one QB league. I mean, kind of tomato tomato. It's a good trade. I like Dell. I think he has a lot of upside where he's so young. Um, and in a dynasty league where, yeah, you want to be good for the next 10, 15 years. Yeah, I think it's a good trade. And again, I don't really like Dak at all. So good trade. Good trade.
Nice, nicely done, boys. And the
We
final
have
trade,
one more. Yeah. Why don't you
final
take
trade.
us through this one and I'll give you why I did it.
Well, this trade happened minutes ago. Before we recorded this, we were putting together our show notes, and Joe realized that he didn't have a defense that he could start this week. So that's how this trade happened. I don't think we really need to say much more. Hunter Renfrow, third string option in this offense. Raiders defense is horrible. Renfro's kind of getting older, and yeah, I think it's pretty much a lose-lose, honestly.
What did I say as I made the trade? Didn't I say something like, man, I know my team sucks, but I don't want to be the guy not starting a defense and look like a total D bag.
Yeah, that's also fair. So kudos to you for saying that you don't want to look like a D bag. So that's it for trades. Let's kind of talk through this past week's bops and flops.
Yeah.
I'll let you get started if you want to take the bops this week.
Yeah. So my first bop of the week, and I think I was telling you before we started this, my bops, I don't really want to just pick like all your marquee players, like your top guys. Even though I have some of them in there. Nico Collins had a good week, and he's a young player. He's not really like a huge household name. I mean, obviously in the dynasty world, we all know him, but yeah, he had a really good week. He started with 7 receptions, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 targets, 35.8 fantasy points. That's a big week out of a guy that isn't one of your top wide receivers in the league. So kudos to you, Nico. Good week.
He's the type of example of why people should be buying low on Kyle Pitts and Drake
Yeah.
London and these super talented wide receivers that have a terrible quarterback, because all you need is one quarterback to come in who's going to just throw a ton like CJ Stroud has been. And I mean, just look at the volume from not only Nico Collins, but Tank Dell. You've been seeing
Yeah.
Robert Woods being relevant. You're seeing John Mechie was putting up some points. Like Dalton Schultz caught a touchdown last week. Like there are a lot of passing options in this offense now. And Nico Collins, this is his third year in the league, and he's finally showing a ton of relevance. And in dynasty leagues, this is what we've been waiting for. So, perfect example of how a quarterback can make or break all the difference, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. My second bop of the week is AJ Brown, who, man, when he had that week 2 game, um, who was that against? Was that against the Vikings, right? It was against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that game when he was lipping off at Kirk Cousins? I mean, lipping off at Jalen Hurts because he wasn't getting any targets. And he still got 6 targets that game, but he had 4 receptions, 29 yards. He was giving him the lip on the sidelines. But you saw out of that, he's gone 14 targets, 13 targets, 9 receptions per game in the following 2 games. So, yeah, he had a big, big week. He had 9 receptions, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, 13 targets, and 38.5 fantasy points. And he's another one of those guys that, like, he's a big household name, but in Tennessee, you always saw like some inconsistency out of him. He's a real like big, big boy, and he's a good wide receiver, but you could have those, week 2 6 points every now and then. And it was more of like a consistent thing, and he'd go off for 30. So, yeah, he's been a little more consistent. He did have that one down week, but he's a little more consistent with Jalen Hurts. So, we like to see that out of him for all the people that took him in your early rounds in redraft or in your dynasty leagues. If people are giving up a lot of assets for a guy like him.
I think I made a trade in a different league where I traded for Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown together, and it was a pretty decent haul on my part. I thought I gave up a decent amount, but I think it was well worth it to get a premier stack like that. Yeah, like AJ
Yeah,
Brown
it's
a lot.
always nice to have a good stack like AJ Brown and Hurts and like Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. So speaking of Kirk Cousins, man, he's throwing some touchdowns this year.
And some interceptions.
Yes, plenty of those too. My third bop, and this is a pretty obvious one, is Christian McCaffrey. So, man, he had a week, didn't he? He had a week, and this is vintage pre-injury Christian McCaffrey. But I mean, when he came into San Francisco last year, what was it? Week 1, he had a touchdown, and then like week 2 or 3 with San Fran, he had a running touchdown and he threw for a touchdown. Like
he had a passing, a throwing, and a receiving touchdown in the same game. He had the trifecta.
Yeah, man, that guy has got some talent. He is, I dare say, one of the most talented, probably by far the most talented player in the NFL right now. Yeah, he had 106 rush yards, 71 receiving yards, 7 receptions, 3 rush touchdowns, 1 reception touchdown, 48.7 points. Man, what a week. That guy won a lot of matchups for a lot of people. That was a good week.
Definitely was. In the same vein, there were a couple of people that actually didn't win a lot of people matchups. In fact, well, actually, I guess I should take it back. They won a lot of people matchups, but not their owners.
Correct. Yeah.
They won a lot of opposing managers the matchups, and we're going to go through some of those right now and talk about the flops. So, number one, first flop that I wanted to go over from this most recent week was Aaron Jones. This one hits close to home because it was a Thursday night game, and first off, he was the RB1 the first week of the season, 26.7 points. He was literally the RB1. He gets out. He's out the next 2 weeks. Then he comes back. He's going to be active. It's a Thursday night game. It's a great matchup against the Lions. Sounds like it's going to be great. And you have to make a decision very early on because it's a game time decision where he's going to be active. And if you don't start him, you're screwing your whole rest of your team. So I made the decision to start him. And 2.4 points, guys. 5 rushing attempts for 18 yards, 2 targets. Just not what you want, not what you really wanted at all. RB61 on the week. I think it's not even listed in there. I'm pretty sure he had a fumble as well that he lost. Yeah, he really let a lot of people down. Not a fan of that week from Jones. I think he bounces back for sure. But yeah, just come on, man. Don't keep doing that. It's no good.
Yeah, 2 targets that's bad for him. I mean, he usually gets peppered with targets.
Yeah, the whole game for Green Bay, they looked horrible.
Yeah,
I mean, there's just no offensive production. I don't think they scored until the fourth quarter. Scored a touchdown at least, so it was bad. My second flop of the week is Chris Olave. This is the first week that he hasn't scored more than 14 points. He put up 1.4 fantasy points. He was targeted 6 times, which is about half of the typical target share that he normally sees. He had only 1 reception for 4 yards. 4 yards for reception. He had no touchdowns. Finished the wide receiver 119 on the week. Just an awful showing. I know he'll probably come back out of this. He's been targeted like crazy the first couple of weeks, but put up a real stinker, and not an ideal start for Chris Olave.
Are you worried about him?
Olave? No.
Yeah, no.
Derek Carr always targets his number 1, number 2 receivers at an insane rate. You saw it with Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, or Devontae Adams and Darren Waller. Like, he always just peppered those guys. And so Derek Carr, he was hurt this last week. I think that had a lot to do with it. I know they even put Jameis Winston in at one point for like 1 throw. And then he air mailed it way down the field. It was like one drop back, and he's just like, go deep. Jameis just hucks it in.
Classic Jameis, yeah.
he almost got picked off. Of course, it would have been even more classic if they had picked him off, honestly. But yeah, I'm not worried about Olave. I do really like Michael Thomas, though. Not this past week, but like he's been getting a ton of targets too, kind of under the radar.
I noticed Alvin Kamara got 11 targets. Or sorry, he got 11 rush attempts and 14 targets with 13 receptions. Granted, he had 33 yards, but
yeah,
13 receptions for 33 yards. They were just peppering him with some those little dump offs.
I saw a funny quote. It was like, Alvin Kamara's receiving line looks like a typical Rashad White rushing line.
Yeah.
14 for 33.
Yeah. Or anybody on the Patriots.
And yeah, exactly. Just incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
But my number one flop of the week, this is someone that I actually am concerned about this year, and that's Joe Burrow. Bengals quarterback, the quarterback 28 on the week. He is making $34 million a week to score 3.7 points. I don't even need to go break down this line. Like he's had 1 week where he scored more than 15 points. He's had 2 weeks with less than 4 points. Is Joe Burrow even startable at this point?
Man, I think I give him a couple games and then I'd plug him back in, but it's tough because he's hurt, and they're just going to keep riding that horse because they paid him, but he's going to be hurt all year, It's one of those, he's not going to get healthy if he just keeps playing, but they just, spent all their money on him, so he's going to have to play.
I know it's not talked about. It's not talked about very often, but like it always takes me back to appreciate how selfless Tom Brady was sometimes when it comes to winning. Like he wanted to win so badly that he would purposely take pay cuts or restructure his contract or not be. He wasn't even trying to be the highest paid quarterback of all time, even though he definitely could have been. And he wanted to restructure to allow the team to be able to get better players to surround him and build that team around him. And when I see like Burrow and Mahomes and Jackson and Watson, they wonder why their teams are struggling. And then they're getting paid, $34 million a game. That math can't be right. Did I say $34 million? I meant $3.4 million. Joe, cut that part out. No, we definitely 3.4 million, but still, like they're going to pay $3.4 million a game to put up 3.7 points. That's you can't be doing that. You can't be putting up $1 million per fantasy point. If you could, like I could probably put up a fantasy point.
I think I could dump the ball off to Joe Mixon 17 times.
Yeah, I think that even that would be like possible. I was throwing the ball around at work today. Accuracy was on point, like just straight up every single throw in the chest. It was like 25 straight completions. I said, I could probably be the Bengals quarterback. I actually said in the moment, I could probably be the Steelers quarterback, but I mean, the same concept applies.
Yeah. 25 completions, 2 yards each. Not really a big deal.
Yeah. But it's because I have their running back on my fantasy team and it's a PPR league. So I'm trying to just get as much out of it as I can. That's it for flops this week. Hopefully we get more out of Burrow. Dynasty, I'm not concerned long term. I think he's a great quarterback, but this year I think he's definitely going to sit on the bench for a lot of people for the next few weeks. Yeah, for sure.
At least past this bye week, I would think.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone's starting anybody in a bye week. Let's go over last week's results here. So, I'm going to put them up on the screen here and just kind of go through the totals, but we'll talk about our predictions. So the first matchup was the Hardy Boys, myself versus the now named Puka Pau. And he changed his team name because Puka really gave me a nice whooping. Not going to lie, it was not fun. I put up 95 points to his 142.54. He took the victory. Both Joe and I had predicted that I was going to win, and so that's an L for us in the predictions this week. Then up next, we have Darius and Josh Slinging Slasher with 192.4 points versus Antonio Brown's Pants Party at 105.54 points. Yeah, he not only crushed his matchup, crushed his predictions, but I believe, and I'm taking a look right now here at league history.
It's 4-0, huh?
Um, but I'm trying to see all-time weekly high scores. So that was the all-time high score for this league too. So
Dang.
kudos to Darius for not
Good
only
job.
putting up a fantastic week, but also a historically good record for this week. And we both had predicted him to win, and we were successful in that. The next matchup was Bajan Mustardson. So we had Seed and Power versus King Cobb. And let me just see here. Get mute myself for a second because I have to cough and I don't want to blow out everyone's ears.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Yeah, so Jean put up 102 points. And I was just looking at his lineup, man. Joey Burrow, man, you still pulled off a win after starting Joe Burrow and Javonte Williams and Jalen Waddle and George Kittle. Man, you had some flops in there, but you still pulled out 102 points for the win to beat an 0-4 team. So kudos on that win. And like I said last week, like those low scoring wins are really what sets you apart from, like, if you're gonna make the playoffs, you're gonna miss the playoffs. Like if you can pull off wins scoring 102 points, that's pretty good.
Hard is that like some of these matchups would have been really, really close had it been against anybody else.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
like it literally was so divided and so not even close in almost every single matchup. Like
Yeah.
if you had been facing King Cobb this week, it would have come down to 0.98 points for the victory. If you know,
Dang.
if it had been Angie versus King Cobb, or you versus Angie, or Seed and Power versus Dan, or me versus Dan, or me versus Seed and Power, or like me at 95 points versus any of the people that put up 80 points. There's four teams that put up 80 points, and I put up 95. I would have had a victory over half the league this week. It's just so
Yeah.
crazy that like the matchups were so one sided. It wasn't any of the high scoring teams against each other. So
Yeah.
bizarre.
It was mostly the good teams against the trashy teams. But what did we who did we pick in that matchup? I think we both took John Musterson, right?
Yeah, we both picked John Musterson in that one, so we were successful in that pick.
Another win.
The next matchup we had was the Norsemen. They are now undefeated. We only have two undefeated teams, and that's Darius and Trevor. And Trevor, kudos to you, man. Really turned your team around. Had a fantastic week, 151.6 points versus Mike Sullivan's 83 points. Kicked his butt, wasn't even close. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely went off the beaten path on this. I was thinking that Mike would have a good week on the backs of Jamar Chase and stuff like that, and that team just continues to disappoint. Kudos to Trevor for continuing to be undefeated, and we're gonna go over matchups in a little bit here, but there's gonna be a shocking matchup when we go over week 5. We both we split that one.
We split that one.
Mm-hmm. So up to this point, that's where you've actually taken the lead on our predictions.
Ooh.
Because
I thought you said you were gaining ground.
I think it's a matter of perspective. It might be like a sloped hill, and like maybe like I'm falling behind, but maybe it's because I'm walking backwards up the hill, and maybe you're walking backwards down the hill, and maybe that's why we're like separating, moving apart, but I'm moving up, and like maybe that's what's happening.
Didn't I give you the analogy of, like, you kind of view it like the Red Sox do, like you're above 500, so your percentage went up. So you feel good. You don't need to make any changes. It's just post All-Star break, keep going.
Listen, we don't need to talk about the Red Sox right now until they sign Shohei Ohtani, okay? Shohei, if you're listening to this, Shohei, please come to Boston. The final matchup We actually got two matchups left. We have anti-vax Achilles and wins versus Christian Mingo. Anti-vax Achilles and wins. Isaiah took this one 107 to 85.
Nice job.
We both predicted that matchup successfully. And then the final matchup was Andy versus Joe, and that's O'Connell does the gritty versus Mike Hawk. 149.26 to 82.98. Andy took that one, and we both predicted that correctly. So after a week of matchups, we ended with you went 5-1, I went 4-2, and for the season, I am 10-8. I'm over 500, and you are 14-4. So really crushing it. Nicely done. Nicely done, man.
It's coming into week 5. There's a lot of football left to play.
This is definitely true. All right. Next, we're going to talk about the bops. I'm sorry, we're going to talk about the MVPs of this last week, the people that made the biggest difference to the matchups. Now, it was such a weird matchup week for us that there really weren't that many MVPs that actually would have made a difference, but we're going to go through what we can and what we could find. First off, my MVP of the week, I'm going with AJ Brown. We already talked about him in the bops. He really just crushed it this week, 38.5 points. And he was a part of the closest matchup in our league. It's crazy to say, but the closest matchup was decided by 20 points. AJ Brown put up 38.5 points with 9 receptions, 175 yards and 2 touchdowns, 13 targets, just insane, and allowed Seed and Power to easily cruise the victory. Who was your MVP this week?
My MVP was, and again, it wouldn't have changed the matchup, but Puka. We like Puka. Puka Pow. Yeah. So for Puka Pow, it was like a 47-point differential, 46.5. Was that your team, EB? I don't remember.
Listen,
I can't remember.
We don't need to talk about this. Yes, it was.
Okay. Oh, my bad. I was just checking. I didn't quite remember. But yeah, Puka. I mean, what a game! Like, he finally paid dirt. Got a touchdown. That was nice. A lot of people had been questioning, man, he's got a lot of targets, he's got a lot of receptions. Is he ever going to get a touchdown? And after the 7-target, 5-reception game last week, where Atwell ended up outscoring him, it was nice to see another 10 targets, 9 receptions, and a touchdown. And he had some long receptions too, so it was nice. He had 163 yards. So yeah, good game by him. Had he not been in the lineup, he would have still beat you. So I'm sorry about that. I can't talk much because I lost too. But yeah, Puka is my MVP for the week.
Don't forget that for the Rams, it was a walk-off touchdown that he caught too.
Yes, wasn't it overtime? It was an overtime walk-off. That was a wild game.
Yeah, pretty crazy, but definitely give him some kudos. We do like Puka here. We are a pro Nakua podcast.
Yes.
My bench MVP. Okay, and I'm gonna give some context to this. Like, the insane part, like I said, is that there actually wasn't a single person on anyone's team that could have changed the outcome singly by themselves. Like, these matchups were so far from being close that not a single person could have changed the matchup. But we're gonna give some shout outs for like most honorable mentions, I guess. So I picked Jake Ferguson. This is the tight end for Dallas, and he's on Angie's team. The Cowboys stomped the Patriots' hopes and dreams into oblivion this past week, and Ferguson put up 18.2 points for Angie. Went 7 for 77. Very decent production for a tight end. I think the majority of that was probably in garbage time because they didn't need really to do much to have a good week. But yeah, I think that was really a solid tight end. I was just sitting on the bench, warming it up there for Angie, and she could have started him and still would have lost. So
yeah, and he's sitting on a lot of benches, I think, but it's nice to see his numbers climbing as the season goes on. He went 4, 11, 12, now 18. Yeah, so it's nice to see his targets and his points start to climb. Yeah, so good game by him. my bench MVP, again, would not have changed the matchup. But yeah, the Seahawks defense. And I don't think the Seahawks now, I mean, obviously the Legion of Boom was a little bit different years ago. They were known for their boom style defense. But if you look at their points on the season, they're -2, 12 against Detroit, which was, I mean, that was a good game. 2 against Carolina. So the fact that you put up 12 against a good offense and then 2 against a trash offense is kind of odd. But 31 against the just awful, awful Giants this week. Again, wouldn't have changed the matchup. It was a 20-point matchup. The Texans, who King Cobb started, had 13 points. But yeah, 31 points on the bench by a defense. And I think I almost would always start the Seahawks over the Texans, but that's okay. Good for you. Good for you. No, you started the Lions, actually. I'm sorry. You started the Lions over the Seahawks and the Texans. So
Yeah, the Texans had a good week too.
yeah, they did. But yeah, that is my bench MVP. So
all right. Well, thank you for that as well, Joe. Going to go into the next section here where we're going to actually go over our week 5 breakdowns and predictions here. Go ahead and get my screen sharing going from my phone. In the meantime, what do you think is going to be the most interesting matchup this upcoming week here for our league?
Yeah, there's definitely some good matchups coming. If you look at Mike Hawk and Donkey AK Ass, that's actually a close matchup. I think that's my first close matchup this week. And I got to do something to get a running back. Obviously, there's no starting running backs on the waiver wire, but I got some bye weeks. So yeah, I got some a running back issue. But yeah, there's a lot of close matchups. All the matchups, honestly, are fairly close. If you look at Antonio Brown's pants party and Kadarius all these hands, that's within 3 points for a projection. Your team, Hardy Boys and Andy Vax, is 10 points apart, and you're playing Isaiah, so that's a little bit of a not rivalry game, but those ones really, really count when you're close friends with someone and you lose. That's kind of tough.
Yeah, there's actually some really, really good matchups like that this week. So I wanted to give some shout outs for this. So first off, me and Isaiah facing each other, the podcast bros from season 1. I'm 3-1. He's 2-2. We're both got really solid teams ready to compete now. We're both projected to be around the same. I'm dealing with injuries. He's dealing with underperformance. Like it's going to be a good matchup and it's going to be close. I'm excited to break it down. But I also wanted to really call out like the number one matchup for the week for me, and I'm excited just talking about it, is both undefeated teams, Darius and Trevor, are going up against each other. Like almost identical projections. And we're only going to be leaving this week with one undefeated team. That's just how it is. And they're facing up in a week that, similar projections. I don't know. I think that's going to be really exciting. And then, we got Seed and Power versus Andy. So we have a lot of like really evenly based matchups. Like those top 3 matchups right there are all teams that are like 3-1, 4-0, super, super close. And so we got Seed and Power versus Andy. And then we go down a little bit and you look at Terrell versus Angie, projected almost the same. Like those guys are kind of in the same tier right there for where their teams are at this year. And then you go down to Dan versus Kadarius's all hands team, and they're brothers. So you get the 2 brothers facing each other. And they're projected to be, like you said, a close matchup. And then you have the 2 tanking teams that are facing each other at the very bottom. And I know you said that is one of the closest matchups, but it's so really it's probably one of the widest projection matchups in the whole league this week at 10 points. So it's going to be a good week. Let's break it down. You ready to keep track of the predictions?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with your team, Hardy Boys and Anti-Vax.
All right. So the Hardy Boys, we got Derek Carr rolling out at quarterback against the New England Patriots.
Oof.
And
Oof.
normally I'd say that doesn't sound that great, but Patriots defense just lost Matthew Judon for potentially the whole season, and Christian Gonzalez, who was our number one rated defender. So we lost. It was a really brutal hit. And then you saw what the Dallas Cowboys were able to do in brutalizing that defense. So what I once thought was pretty much no chance. Hey, if Derek Carr is healthy, there's a pretty good shot that this could be not as bad as I was expecting. But we got him up against Anthony Richardson. Tennessee, well, typically not looking that great. They're decent against the run, and Anthony Richardson is a running quarterback. Then we got Aaron Jones versus DeAndre Swift. We've got Derrick Henry versus Joe Mixon. We've got DeAndre Hopkins versus Calvin Ridley, the Gambler. We got Tyreek Hill versus DJ Moore. We've got Dallas Goedert versus Evan Ingram. We've got Devontae Adams versus Najee Harris. We've got Michael Thomas versus Jerry Jeudy. And the Jets defense versus Denver versus the Falcons defense versus Houston. Who are you taking in this matchup?
Man, this is a tough matchup, but as you got going, you got into Tyreek Hill against DJ Moore and Devontae Adams and Najee Harris. I'm gonna have to take the Hardy Boys. I'm gonna take the Hardy Boys.
All right. We do appreciate the support for the fellow podcast member here. It's gonna be a tough matchup this week. I think it's going to be very close, but I'm going to I can't let you be right because you picked me and I end up winning. So I have to pick myself as well. Otherwise that would just be setting myself up for failure. Isaiah, love you. It's going to be a close matchup. You probably will win. All right. Now we'll go to the next one, which is like the powerhouse matchup of the week right here. The two undefeated teams. Look at this stacked up.
Now, Moss, he's projected like nothing. Is that because they're thinking Jonathan Taylor's coming back?
Well, it's that, but also because Tennessee is really strong against the run. And he's definitely
getting week last week.
He had a down week last week. He's getting usage, but he didn't score. He was only targeted once last week, and it looks like, if I remember correctly, he really only got the majority of that usage when Richardson was out.
Yeah.
So if Richardson's back, he was back this past week. He only put up 9 points with Richardson there. So that's an area where the projections are probably going to be playing in as well.
Yeah.
We've got Allen versus Hurts. Pretty solid. Moss versus Jacobs against Green Bay there. I like Jacobs. Montgomery versus Stevenson. I like Montgomery.
You're welcome for Montgomery.
Yep. Diggs versus Jefferson. McLaurin versus Myers. Andrews versus Kmet. Kelsey versus James Cook. Connor versus Dobbs. Cowboys versus Bills. Who are you taking?
Cowboys are playing San Francisco. Dang. Shoo. It's a tough one. I mean, I like Montgomery a lot better than Stevenson. I like McLaurin better than Myers. Kelsey obviously better than Cook. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jazz Slinging Slasher.
You're going with the commish, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I think that Trevor has his moment in the sun, and it's time to shine. I think he's going to take the victory this week versus Darius. I think that playing at 9:30 in the morning for Buffalo versus Jacksonville is going to really throw him off. And I think that Zach Moss is going to underperform. I think we're going to see a big week from Jacobs against Green Bay on prime time on Monday night. Jefferson's going to have a decent week. So I'm going with the Norseman to maintain undefeated coming out of this week.
I like it.
All right. Next up, we got Seed and Power versus Andy. You want to take this one?
Yeah, so we have Kirk Cousins going up against Kansas City. And every time I say it's going to be a shootout, it ends up being the lowest scoring game of the week. So there's that. Dak against San Francisco, which San Francisco has a good defense. You got Robinson and McCaffrey. You got Mostert and Williams, Lamb and Thielen. You got AJ Brown and Chris Olave. You got Kittle and Hawkinson, Waddle and Smith, Ibu and Garrett Wilson, which Garrett Wilson had a good week, and Zach Wilson looked like not the worst quarterback in the NFL because he had Mac look worse. But Garrett Wilson against Denver, that could be the matchup to watch right there. And then you got the Eagles and Ravens. So who are you taking here? You go first. Who do you think is going to take this matchup?
I know this is going to be a controversial take to go against Bijan Robinson going up against Houston. And I feel like awful saying this, but I think Andy's going to do it. I think that he's going to have just enough pieces. I think that he's going to have. He just picked up Prescott, which is probably a good thing for him because his other options were Zach Wilson and Dobbs and Bryce Young. But yeah, the Garrett Wilson matchup is intriguing. He's got Devontae Smith, who's been looking really good. He's got Hawkinson. I do think that is going to be a shootout, like you mentioned. But then you've got Thielen, who's gotten so many targets. You've got Olave, who just came off a down week, but he's ready to have another bounce back week. And you look on the other side, and there's, again, stars everywhere, studs everywhere.
Yeah.
But Deebo Samuel is hit or miss. You've got
Waddle's hit or miss.
Waddle is less hit or miss, but he's, they're playing against the Giants, and that's going to be, they're going to destroy the Giants. So how many opportunities is he going to have in a blowout game? I think that Mostert is falling second fiddle to A-Chain. Yeah. So when I'm looking at this right now, I'm like, I just think that it's going to be a shootout. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think that Andy's going to take it. What about you? What do you think?
One thing I like is AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on opposing matchups. That could go either way. One of them has a good week, the other doesn't. Typically, neither of them usually have great weeks together. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Andy's team as well. I hate to pick the same thing as you, but yeah, that looks like a good matchup though.
These matchups are going to be fun to watch this week. So the next one and you're taking these down, right?
Yes, I am, my friend.
Sweet. The next matchup is Terrell versus Angie, Puka Pau versus Christian Mingo. This is like a battle of the rookies right here. We've got Jordan Love versus CJ Stroud. I like Stroud there. We've got Jaylen Warren against Baltimore's defense versus Tony Pollard. I like Pollard. Got Pacheco versus Minnesota versus Madison versus Kansas City. I kind of like Pacheco in that matchup. We got Puka Nacua versus Christian Watson. I like Puka. We've got Hollywood Brown versus Tutu Atwell. Don't really know. That's kind of a wash for me.
Yeah.
Tyler Higbee versus Laporta. I like Laporta in that one.
I do too.
Oh my God. He's starting Jonnu Smith. I don't believe it.
Bro, he's putting up more points than Kyle Pitts. So
I know I was going to do him in my breakouts to watch, but I just didn't get around to it. But he's actually had 6 to 8 targets every single week, 4, 5, 6 receptions the last 3 weeks, 10, 11, 18 points. He's honestly, I think like a top 6 tight end on the year.
Yeah.
I literally can't believe it. But
wow.
He's starting him. We've got Miles Sanders versus Calvin Austin. Colts defense versus the Pats defense. So, who are you going with?
Oh man, this is a tough one. Oh man, I'm gonna go with Puka Pau.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go a little bit to the side, and I'm gonna go with Angie. Christian Mingo. I think that CJ Stroud is underrated, and I like Tony Pollard, even though it's a tough defense. And I like Laporta, and I think that there's enough pieces there to just kind of take that little edge. So I'm going to go with
Yeah,
Angie this week.
there definitely could be. So,
All right, let's go to what looks to be the closest matchup of the week against the two brothers.
ooh, man,
So
this is close.
we've got Lamar versus Mahomes. Got to be thinking about leaning Mahomes in this situation after he just came off a really, really horrible showing in front of Taylor Swift. We've got Damian Pierce versus, I think it's Devin. Devin, yeah, Devin A-Chain, who's been picking up, and the Giants look horrible. We've got Kamara against New England versus ETN versus Buffalo, Buffalo's a lot of runs on the ground.
Yeah,
As you saw last week when A-Chain took him for 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. We've got Brandon Ayuk versus Jamar Chase. Obviously, hope that Chase has his bounce back week, but who knows? We've got Pittman versus St. Brown. I like St. Brown. We've got both tight ends who are injured and not going to be playing this week because they're on bye. So let's go down to the bench and see who the options. Okay, he's probably going to start a Quonk. I think we decided to just call him Chig. He's Andrew's got
yeah, I think we did.
Mike's got Chig on the bench, and then we've got Kylan Granson probably going to get the start, or Jawan Johnson on the other side for Dan, and then we've got Kendrick Bourne and Christian Kirk, and the Steelers defense rounding out his team here. And on the other side, we've got Jordan Addison. I would imagine Jamar Gibbs and Breece Hall rounding out that side, but Nico Collins could find his way sneaking into that lineup as well. So it's actually tough to kind of predict without those remaining pieces in there. But let's just say that it's Nico Collins instead of Addison, and it's Gibbs in there instead of Ford, and the defense that they put in. Broncos defense. That's a bad pick. Who are you going with?
Oh, this is hard. I don't know. Tough because they didn't set it, but man, I'm gonna go with Antonio Brown's pants party. Though Kadarius all these hands, if he put in Breece Hall could have a really, really good game.
Against Denver.
But I'm still gonna go. Yeah, against Denver, you could. It's tough because he hasn't really had a great game so far. But I mean, everybody has a good game against Denver, and Gibbs isn't really getting the touches that he should. So,
if you're going with Antonio Brown's pants party. Is that who you're going with?
I'm gonna switch it. I'm sorry. I'm gonna switch it. Yeah, because maybe he'll listen to this podcast and he'll start those guys. So I'm gonna go with Kadarius all these hands.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll take friend of the podcast Dan, Antonio Brown's pants party, so that we can be a little bit different, but also because I think that there's a lot of variables that would need to go right for Kadarius's all hands team to get their first victory of the year. I picked him last week and he let me down. I'm not going to pick him again and let him let me down again. I'd much rather him let me down when I'm picking Dan. So,
well, please start Breece Hall. Please start him.
let's talk about just a real barn burner over here. Just a real quality matchup.
This is probably the best matchup of the week. I mean, if we're honest, like my buddy Mike is my good friend, and man, Tua could have a good week, but Justin Fields could have a good week, I guess. I mean, he just had one good week. Rashad White and Kelly, they could give you goose eggs for sure. Yeah, tough matchup. And I don't even think I have a running back to put in because obviously I have depleted my team of running backs. And Dobbins got injured. And Yeah. I'm going
It's
to pick
rough life.
myself, you know? Actually, no, I'm not going to pick myself because I'm looking at their team. They have a lot more startable players than I do. So I'm going to pick Donkey, aka Ass.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with them too. They have a potentially healthy Saquon sitting on the bench that hasn't made
Yeah.
his way into the starting lineup yet. So yeah,
Now, do you think if they had Saquon and Chubb, that can you scroll down a little bit? Who
mhm.
else do they have? Sutton, Boyd. They'd at least be a lot more competitive if they had Saquon and Chubb healthy. You know, they have Zach Ertz, who could be in the starting lineup.
Yeah, Bateman has been out.
Yeah. So they could be, you know, I think they would end the year like 500 or above 500, not like 1-16 like I might end up.
Yeah. So we've got that's the last matchup to go over here. So we've got our predictions. I'm excited. I think there's going to be some really interesting matchups this next week, and I hope they don't disappoint. I hope it's not as lopsided as this most recent week was for us. That was crazy.
And listen, we had a lot of differences, so we had 3 different picks. So
Yeah,
you might
whenever this happened last year, I went different like more than one time. I always lost
really.
every time, and I ended up
Yeah,
just falling so far behind because I said I'll get different. I'll get different. I'll gotta make up ground, and it's true. Like, there's only way you can make up ground. But the problem is that
that's true.
Isaiah was just so good at picking the right team that even when I went
Mhm.
different, it didn't matter. But speaking of getting different, there actually were quite a few changes to the power rankings this week. So we're going to finish off going over the power rankings. So um, not a ton has changed, but at the very, very bottom, King Cobb has actually taken over number 12 spot for the worst in the league. So King Cobb, my apologies, but number 12. Number 11, your friend Joe, your friend Mike. Joe, you're sitting at number 11. This is power rankings for this season. Obviously, not dynasty power rankings, but is to be
I'll
expected.
move up.
Number 10, we got Kadarius's all hands team. It's hard to come back from an 0-4 start, and that's kind of where he's at. I don't think he's going to be there long, just based on like what he should be projected to do. But Sleeper's been
Yeah.
doing this weird thing lately where it doesn't like show your projections right away, like what you were supposed to have been projected at. So I can't go in and correct this until maybe next week with what he was projected at the last few weeks. I think that might update his ranking a little bit. Then number 9, falling down a spot, we have Antonio Brown's pants party. Again, hard when you're not winning games to move up the power rankings. Then at number 8, we've got Christian Mingo dropping down 1 spot from last week. Then at number 7, we've got Terrell, Shut Up and Take My Money, which is now Puka Pal, moving up 2 spots in the power rankings. At number 6, we've got No Movement from Anti-Vax Achilles and Wins. Number 5, I have fallen, taken the biggest drop week over week.
Ooh.
The Hardy Boys down to number 5 after losing this past week and really underperforming my projections. Then at number 4, down 1 spot as well, is Andy. O'Connell does the gritty. And at number 3, we actually have Bajan Mustardson moving up 1 spot. At number 2, we have Trevor the Norseman moving up as well. And staying number 1 is Jash Slinging Slasher. Darius maintaining his lead at the number 1 spot in the power rankings.
Dang. Looking at these power rankings, though, do you have last week's? Because it looked like, if I remember right, Josh Slingen Slasher, his PR score was like 150 last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, let me take a look and see. So his PR score was 145 last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So some big changes there. I'm not sure what that's all about, but
Well, part of it has to do with like there's total points scored, wins and losses, who you actually ended up facing up against, how much they scored.
Yeah.
As well as like what your projections were. And until I put in, like, some of these numbers might be a little bit off until I can actually enter what they were projected to score at versus what they scored at. But as of right now, it's, you know, it's hard to say, because once it shows that he was projected to score at this past week, I don't know, 125, 120, but he scored 190. That'll probably give him a little bit more of a boost if that was the case.
Yeah. But it definitely looks like our top two teams are the top two rated teams. Those are definitely what seems to be the closest two teams in the league. So good for you guys.
No doubt. And I think everyone's scores dropped a little bit, and I think it's because of the projections not being able to be entered in. So I'm looking at almost every single team, like even the Norseman, who is still undefeated, dropped by 15 points in those numbers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that checks out.
That's a good call out, though. All right. So that is going to be it for that today. Let's stop my sharing here. Before we close out here, I know we like to talk about our Patriots prediction for this week. What do you think is going to happen when the Patriots play the Saints?
Well, if you asked me last week, I would say we would take the W. We just look so bad, dude. We look so bad. And losing Judon and losing Gonzalez, like, I'm not saying we're gonna get whooped. I'm not saying it's gonna be 38-3 or 28-3, but I think we're gonna get beat by 2 scores. It's gonna be a 2-score game, and I don't think we're taking a win. So, but I mean, anything could happen, and sometimes the Patriots end up pulling off random BS that no one expected. So,
yeah, I'm not sold on the team. I think that, Jimmy Garoppolo. No, I'm sorry, Derek Carr's over there now. What am I thinking? I'm thinking of Las Vegas. So there's not even any like revenge game going on here. There's no narrative. You got injuries shaking up the team. I just don't like this game. I'm taking the under on points scored in this game. Like if I was looking at the Vegas odds, not starting anyone from this game in any of my fantasy like DFS lineups, and I'm gonna probably take the Patriots to have an L this week. It's not great. Not great.
Bro, watch Matt go throw for like 3 touchdowns and 300 yards and prove us all wrong. But
that's
I cross my fingers and say, like, please, come on, do it.
I know. That's what I was going to say. That's the thing, is you can't hurt me. I'm already deciding they're going to lose. So if he comes out and he does the opposite, then I'm on cloud 9. That's the way. That's the way. You just always expect the worst, and if you get something slightly better, then you're happy. That's the only way I've been able to cope with this year's Boston Red Sox season. So.
And it's like the last 3 years, it's been like Red Sox or even the Patriots. It's like they give us this little like glimmer of hope, like, oh, we're a game out of the playoffs. We're gonna make it, and then you just get an absolute beat down when it matters. Yeah,
no doubt. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching all the way through the end. As always, please make sure to give us a follow on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment down below, like the video. It helps the algorithm. If you want to get people involved in what it's like to, be a part of a dynasty league, what are some of the matchups? What are the intricacies? What do the trades look like? Share the podcast. We'd love to, be able to get introduced to people outside of our own league. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and we have an account on the X, as well as on TikTok, that we actually are going to start posting exclusive content to this week. So stay tuned for exclusive content that will only be found on X and on TikTok. But until next week, my name is Matthew, and on behalf of Joe, thank you for joining that Dynasty Podcast. Happy hunting, good luck, and we'll see you next time.